So my next guest is military historian Chris Newton. Chris, thank you for coming on my show. Look, we've got those poppies on. Yeah, this time of year, it's always a time for me to reflect on what happened, in the Second World War and the First World War, especially because I had family members involved. If you go to the local war memorials in our cemeteries, there's some of my family on there from the First World War. And it's a day where we remember our glorious dead, and it's a day where we should remind ourselves that this should never happen again. But at the moment, we're seeing problems throughout the world, especially in Israel and in the Ukraine as well.
Yeah, it's extremely important that we wear our poppies and we remember the people who have fallen during the course of conflicts ever since the First World War. And as you said, the world is dangerous, and it's becoming increasingly more dangerous with Ukraine, with Israel-Hamas now. And we need to remind ourselves that we live relatively comfortable lives here, but there are other societies out there that have ideologies that aren't liberal democracies, and they want to impose their ideologies on others.
You see, this is the thing with these ideologies. They sort of creep. They expand at sometimes a rapid pace, and they certainly did during the Second World War. Do you think we've not learnt our lessons from the past?
I think, I think especially over the past 10, 20, 30 years, I don't think we've sufficiently learned the lessons of history.
Yeah.
From my own experience, I have been talking for at least 15 years about the potential threat from Russia, and very few people were listening.
Yeah.
I actually worked for the Conservative Party in the late 2000s, and we were trying to highlight the threat from Russia.
So is it a case then, Chris, of people just thinking and saying that it can never happen again?
Yeah, I think people are, we've experienced a period of, prosperity, of relative peace, although we've had problems, and we've kind of fallen out of thinking that something like the First and Second World Wars could happen again, or some great power conflict could happen again. Especially during the last 20 years, we've had people saying that the main threat's going to be insurgencies and terrorism, which they still are, but people have forgotten that great power competition, it hasn't gone away, and it's come back with a vengeance over the past 10 years especially. Now,
this country has always been a safe country. Well, it has for the last 30, 40 years now, and I can remember the attacks in the 80s and 70s from the IRA. Always remember that as a young person growing up. But we live in relative safety at the moment in this country. Is it getting more dangerous, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. As we've got Russia and Ukraine, and Russia has ambitions, in Eastern Europe, and I don't think if it's given the chance, it would end with Ukraine.
See, this is the thing, Chris. I know a lot of people have a go at me about the money we've invested into Ukraine, about the defence, about the weapons, but it's so important.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important. As I've said, if Russia was successful in conquering Ukraine, they have historical imperial claims to other parts of Eastern Europe as well. So I don't think they would have ended with.
It's not just the imperial claims as well, because it's also that, I mean, Ukraine is a rich country where it's the breadbasket of Europe and parts of the world. It actually exports food to Africa.
Yeah, and that's why, for example, what's happening with regards to the bombing of the grain silos and the blockade in the Black Sea, it's having an impact on everyone. It's having an impact across the world.
Let's talk about young people, Chris, for a moment, on the subject of war. So, growing up for me in the 70s, my granddad, he served with the Sherwood Foresters in the Second World War. He was at Monte Cassino. He went all through Italy. I can remember him telling me about the time he saw Mussolini. Who'd just been, I think, executed and hung, and he was hanging from a chain in, I think it might have been Rome, I'm not sure. But I used to spend a lot of time with him talking about the war stories, and so for me that was very helpful. I got that direct link to the Second World War, whereas our young people today haven't got that direct link. They might have had, dads in Afghanistan or Iraq, but let's remember the Second World War was a big war. You know, there was millions of people killed. Do you think our young people sort of don't understand wars as much today?
Yeah, and I had that direct link with the Second World War through my granddad as well. And of course the younger generations don't have that.
Yeah.
So that's why it's extremely important for people like me to be in the universities and to educate young people about military history. And that's why we need military history to be a central part of history courses in universities and also in schools as well.
Yeah. See, I always remember my grandma as well. She was in the Land Army during the war. She worked out in Suffolk during the war, doing a bit for King and Country, and she came back and back to Ashfield and raised a family. But she had a story to tell as well. Sometimes she would come to London to see friends, and she experienced the bombing raids in London. And I would imagine, well, I know that today that's beyond our wildest imagination. You could not imagine this city of ours getting bombed and going into the underground and bunkers and stuff like that. So we should learn those lessons from the past.
Yeah, and if you kind of read accounts from people in Ukraine, in Kyiv, for example, they thought that what they have been experiencing with regards to the bombing raids and the missile raids, they couldn't have imagined it, and yet they're right in the middle of it now. Yeah. And it could happen to us one day. Well,
it could. That's the wonderful thing about our country. Sometimes we're said we're not a tolerant and welcoming country with the refugees that's coming from France. I'm sorry to keep banging on about it, but actually, when you look what we've done for the people of Ukraine with the financial support, the military support, and the fact that hundreds of thousands of people in this country have opened their homes up. We had one next door to me actually, a young family to bring them over to keep their women and their children safe. It just shows that it is real there.
Yeah, and we, if the cause is we can see there's a real cause there. Yeah. The British people are very generous people.
They are very generous.
And that's what we've done with people from Ukraine and indeed from other conflicts as well.
Yeah, and then we see the problems in Israel. I mean, that's I didn't see that coming. Israel obviously didn't see it coming as well. We've seen a lot of horrible stuff there. We've seen the videos, we've seen the press cuttings. It just seems again that we've not learned the lessons from the past.
Yeah, I mean that's again. It's another indication of a group with an ideology, with a firm ideology about how that area of the world should look like, and again they people kind of over the past few years underestimated the capabilities of Hamas, and yet under the radar they've been plotting, planning, potentially with Iran probably. And again, Iran is another one of these threats that we should watch and
no easy solution to this, is there?
There's no easy solution because you have Hamas, believe that the state of Israel shouldn't exist.
Okay, so look, to talk about that all night, Chris. Thanks for coming along. That's so interesting. I hope we learn the lessons of the past. I certainly, have moments where I think about my granddad and the things he went through, the horrors of the Second World War. And I'm sure there were many men of his time that came back changed. I know some of the families talk about their relatives that was in the POW camps out in Burma. They came back mentally scarred. Some took their own life. Some were never the same again. And you could talk to my mates now in Uthwaite, where I'm from, about their dads and some of the episodes they had later in life. The breakdowns, the violence, the drinking, all the horrible stuff. You cannot imagine what they went through. But thanks for coming, Chris. That's so interesting.